Week 1 of the college football season has already come and gone, and today I want to talk about 10 teams who, in my opinion, might have already ruined their season. Sure, they could pull a 2024 Notre Dame and win out and go to the playoff, but honestly, I don't think any of these 10 teams will end up in this year's playoff and could be headed for really bad seasons. But before we get started with that, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you can support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's go ahead and get started and talk about 10 teams that I think ruined their 2025 college football season already. The first team I want to talk about is the Kansas State Wildcats, as they were one of the top teams in the Big 12 going into the season. A big reason for that was their quarterback Avery Johnson, but besides him, there really haven't been many players on this team that have stood out or really helped them a lot. Jace Brown has been decent at the receiver position, but other than that, K-State has really struggled, and on the field it's been even worse. They'd actually play in Week 0 in Ireland against Iowa State, and in a game that went back and forth, Kansas State ended up losing 24-21 after the Cyclones were able to convert a late fourth down. Kansas State had a chance to make a statement the following week, but instead this past weekend during Week 1, they almost had the most embarrassing moment of the year. Against North Dakota, they were down late, and it took a good Avery Johnson drive and a little bit of luck, and they ultimately beat North Dakota 38-35 in the Little Apple, and for now the team is 1-1, but Kansas State's season I think is pretty much over. Luckily, their next couple of games should be somewhat easier, as they play Army, Arizona, and UCF before then getting going against Baylor, but K-State embarrassed themselves in the first part of the season, and they're the only team on the list that's played 2 games so far. The second team I want to talk about is the North Carolina Tar Heels. Going into year 1 under head coach Bill Belichick, there was some buzz. He brought in a lot of transfers, and many expected the future Hall of Fame coach to turn things around in just one season. Unfortunately, that did not happen. Transfer quarterback Gio Lopez was absolutely awful, going 4 of 10 for 69 yards and an interception. Sixth-year quarterback Max Johnson wasn't much better, only throwing for 100 yards. They got nothing going on offense, and defense wasn't much better either. TCU ended up scoring 48 points and made Josh Hoover look like the best quarterback in college football. North Carolina's off to an 0-1 start, and just like K-State, they should have a couple of games to figure it out, as they'll play Charlotte, Richmond, and UCF before a game that'll really show where they are against number 8 Clemson. North Carolina's season isn't over yet, but it's pretty much on life support after just 1 week, based on how they performed. Our third school is a second team out of the Big 12, and that'll be the UCF Knights. Scott Frost returns back to Orlando to coach the Knights after a failed experiment with Nebraska, and so far in his first game, he doesn't exactly look like the 2017 Knights. Going into the season, Cam Fancher was named their new starting quarterback, and he was a transfer from FAU, and they would have to replace the production they lost in second-round pick RJ Harvey. UCF didn't do a great job in their first game, as Cam Fancher would end up getting hurt, and they didn't really find a go-to running back either. It was just a messy game all around, with a couple of delays and some stoppage time, and ultimately backup quarterback Taven Jackson had to come in and save the day, and after a late touchdown pass, the Knights would only win 17-10. UCF has not been great since they joined the Big 12, and I'm not sure if that trend is really going to change this year. They play North Carolina A&T and North Carolina in their next 2 games, but after that, I'm not sure who I picked them to beat. Maybe at home against Oklahoma State, or maybe at home against Houston. I don't know. Either way, UCF I think is in complete rebuild mode, and it might take another year or 2 for Scott Frost to really get things going, but I feel like UCF's season is pretty much already over, unless Taven Jackson really explodes. Our fourth school is a team out of the ACC, and that is the Wake Forest Demon Deacons. Sure, they had some good seasons under Dave Clawson, but for the most part, Wake Forest has been near the bottom of the ACC, and they're one of the worst Power 4 teams historically. Going into this season, they also had a first-year head coach, as Jake Dickert comes over from Washington State. He brought with him a fourth-school quarterback in Robbie Ashford, and a freshman who played in just a couple of games from Charlotte. Wake Forest was pretty terrible in their first game, as they faced off against the worst team in the FBS, Kennesaw State. If the Owls didn't miss an extra point in the first half, the game might have actually been a lot more interesting at the end, as ultimately Wake Forest would win by 1 point, and Kennesaw State turned the ball over on downs. I wonder what would have happened if Wake Forest had to score again, because their offense was stuck in the mud. From here, the Demon Deacons probably have 2 more wins on the schedule, as they'll play against Western Carolina and Delaware, but outside of that, I'm not sure they beat. I wouldn't pick them to beat NC State, I wouldn't pick them to beat Virginia, and I'm not even sure if I would pick them to beat Oregon State. It's going to be a long season for Wake fans, and Dickert has a lot of work to do. For our next team, we're going to talk about another ACC school, and that is the Virginia Tech Hokies. Honestly, the most disappointing part about this year's Hokies team is that this is their second straight season where they have just not been able to capitalize on some preseason hype. Kyron Drones is back for his third year as a starter, and he didn't really look that much better. He had 200 yards without a touchdown, and he was very inaccurate and also had a couple of costly turnovers. The Hokies couldn't get the run game going either, and besides 8 combined catches from the Greens, Virginia Tech's offense was completely dead. Luckily, their defense wasn't terrible against South Carolina, but they did let up a couple of big-time plays and ultimately lost 24-11 to the number 13 Gamecocks. I'm not trying to dog on South Carolina at all, but the Gamecocks won this game not playing their best football. I'm not quite sure if Virginia Tech's really going to figure it out under Brent Pry, but we'll find out a lot in week 2 as they'll face off with Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt is not exactly a juggernaut by any means, but they're projected to make a bowl game, so if Virginia Tech can win this game, then they have games against Old Dominion and Wofford, and that should get them back to 3-1, with a chance to capitalize on a weak ACC schedule and maybe win 8 games. We'll have to wait and see, but Virginia Tech's season right now, in my opinion, is on life support, and they've got to figure out what to do at Kyron Drones. Our 6th team on the list is the Army Black Knights. I'm not really that surprised that they had a bad week 1 showing, but after last season's breakout performance with Heisman finalist Bryson Daly at quarterback, I expected Army to be decent this year. In their first game without Daly, Dwayne Coleman was decent, but he ended up having 2 interceptions and got hurt before the backup Cale Helms had to come in. Army struggled with an FCS Tarleton State team at home, and with pretty much no fans watching, the game had a crazy finish. There were 2 missed field goals by Army, and ultimately Tarleton State actually made a field goal, and the Texans went in and got their biggest win in school history. Army is now already behind the 8 ball, and it's not like they really had crazy expectations, but who knows, maybe they could have gone undefeated and taken a college football playoff spot. I highly doubt it, but Army's season is already over. There's no coming back from that Tarleton State game, and now they play another team on the list in Kansas State in week 2. If by some way they pull off a miracle there, then maybe they have a shot, but I honestly doubt that happens, and I'm not sure who Army beats the rest of the year. We now get to our first SEC team on the list, and that is the Alabama Crimson Tide. Everybody just expected Kalen DeBoer to come to Tuscaloosa and basically hold the same standard and have the same amount of success that Nick Saban had. I always thought that was far-fetched, but Kalen DeBoer's Crimson Tide players are just not playing tough. That is something that Alabama fans have come to expect, and so far it's been a mixed bag from DeBoer. Last season, the team ended up only winning 9 games, and in week 1, they kind of got manhandled by Florida State. The Seminoles only won 31-17, but the Tide looked completely confused. Even though this is going to be the 4th year for quarterback Ty Simpson, who was a 5-star in high school, he looked like a true freshman on the field at times, as he just wasn't able to really stay composed, and ultimately, Bama was not able to win. They got nothing out of the running game, and besides a big game from Jeremy Bernard, there's a lot for Alabama to work on. Besides games against Eastern Illinois and UL Monroe, the Tide will play against 9 more Power 4 teams. We'll find out a lot more about them against Wisconsin, and then especially against number 4 Georgia. Crimson Tide fans were expecting DeBoer to get them back to the playoff, and right now they are far behind on that goal. Sure, they could end up winning out and saving their season, but when you look at their schedule, they've probably got about 6 more ranked games to play. I'm not sure if this Tide team's going to pull through, and we'll see what happens after the season is over. For our 8th team, we're to go over to the Big Ten and talk about the UCLA Bruins. I gotta be honest, I didn't have high expectations for UCLA this year, as I wasn't really a big fan of them last season either. I don't think Coach Foster's the guy for the job. But they brought in their shiny toy in Nico Imaliava from Tennessee, so everyone just expected everything to be fixed. Maybe offensive coordinator Tino Sunseri would work some magic, but that wasn't exactly on full display in week 1, as UCLA got humiliated 43-10 at home against Utah. Devon Dampier looked like a week 1 Heisman against the Bruins, and Nico had no time to pass the ball. It was truly a disastrous game for the Bruins, as Nico finished with 136 yards with just 1 touchdown and 1 pick. They were not able to get anything going on the ground, and the defense couldn't get stops. The Big Ten is going to be difficult this year, and their best chance at a win probably comes against New Mexico. I'm sure they'll be favored against Northwestern as well, but outside of that game, I'm not sure if I'm picking the Bruins. They could easily lose on the road to UNLV this weekend, and if that happens, I think the sky will be falling in Westwood. To make UCLA fans feel a little bit better, I don't think they had the worst performance of a Week 1 Big Ten team. That award goes to the Northwestern Wildcats. Besides a semi-decent season from head coach David Braun in 2023, Northwestern has been abysmal for a few years now. The quarterback play has not gotten any better, as in fact it has regressed. Preston Stone had 161 yards and 4 interceptions and might take home the award for the worst quarterback in the Power 4 right now. Seemingly sixth-year running back Cam Porter was not able to get anything going on the ground, and the defense against Tulane wasn't really great either. They lost to Tulane 23-3, and Northwestern's season, in my opinion, is already over. They might get a win against Western Illinois, but I think it's 50-50 that they beat UCLA or UL Monroe, and after that, I don't think they win a game. Purdue looks a little bit better than I thought, so I think Northwestern probably wins 2 games this year. They probably beat Western Illinois and probably beat UL Monroe. It's going to be another bad season, and I think the Wildcats administration is going to have to make a decision here soon. They need to start prioritizing football in some way, and sure, they might have a fancy stadium at some point, but for now, the team is essentially useless on the field. And the final team I want to talk about is the Boise State Broncos out of the Mountain West. Boise State had a lot of hype, and many thought that they could get back to the college football playoff. Unfortunately, that looks to already be over, as without Ashton Jeanty, they just really weren't much. Their 2 new running backs in Syer Gaines and Malik Sherrod only combined for about 70 yards, and their offensive line wasn't good, and Maddox Madsen wasn't good either. The offense seemingly was just stuck in the mud, and USF eventually gained a ton of momentum, had a couple of great trick plays, and just took it to Boise. Bulls won 34-7, basically knocking Boise out of playoff contention already, and they may have taken their spot. We'll see how USF does in the coming weeks, but Boise State has a lot to figure out. Who's going to run the ball? Is Maddox Madsen really that good? And how is the defense going to get better? I don't have the answers to those questions, but Boise State has a somewhat favorable schedule, as besides a matchup with Notre Dame, there's no game on that list that is super daunting. I still think Boise has a chance to win 8, 9, or even 10 games, but they need to figure some things out quick. For now though, Boise State's season looks to be on life support as well. So yeah, in today's video, we talked about 10 teams who could have ruined their season in Week 1, and what do you guys think? If you're a fan of one of these schools, how does your team fix things? What videos should I do next? And before you go, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and check out some of the videos on the end screen. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.